Welcome to the screening. We got Ken Fero is going to say just a few introductory remarks. Ken Fero has made the film Ultraviolence, and then we'll have a chat afterwards, if that's all right. Hopefully we'll have a few more people trickling in. So welcome, Ken, to the space.
Thank you.
And you want to say some introductory remarks, yeah?
Hold it. Okay. So thanks for the invitation to this liberated space. And I guess when Migrant Media started, which is what I'm part of, Migrant Media is a collective of activist radical filmmakers. We started in London, in Hackney, in a squat in like the late 80s. And for 10 years, we actually managed to keep a place going, which meant we didn't have to work. And instead we decided to work, like proper work, activist work, and educate ourselves, try to find out what had been left out. And for us it was all about liberation politics. So Migrant Media is a collective of people from migrant, refugee, black backgrounds who came together because we wanted to do films about resistance. So now first film was really 91, something that's 90, 30 years. 30 years later, we've got this. 20 years ago, we made another film called Injustice about police killings, which is still banned by Channel 4 and BBC. You can watch it online if you want to. And this is a follow-up to it. The film's really about resistance to police killings, how people have organized. And really, the film was made for your generation, younger people, to let you know about the history of resistance in this issue and how it relates to liberation struggles, anti-imperialism, anti-colonialism. And we can have a talk afterwards about what can be done about this issue. It's pretty heavy, maybe, for some of you, but has to be seen and has to be talked about. Thank you for inviting me here.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, sir, for showing us that film. I think it opened our eyes to a lot of things. As a black person myself, and a lot of my family members grew up in London at that time, they're always telling me, watch out for the police officers, don't get stopped and searched. And I never really understood. I could see that they're traumatized, but I never understood myself. But just by seeing that is helped me connect that. So, yeah, eye-opening. Thank you.
Anyone else? Ken comes back. Ken, do you want to talk to that?
There's a lot of trauma in the film, but there's also a lot of resistance. You see it everywhere with the families and the way the film is put together. Because obviously, you know it and you feel it, and there's other people here that do as well. But a lot of people don't. They want to block it off. So this is for them really to say, you can't ignore this. And if you ignore it, it's being done in your name if you don't do something about it. I mean, this film is 75 minutes long, so I feel like I've spoken for 75 minutes, so I don't want to talk again, right? I mean, I'm interested to know from people here if they feel,
Yeah, cheers. Thanks for that, Ken. It was just, it's almost too much to take, but it's what we all know. And it's what we've all actually been through. The level of police violence has been absolutely pervasive. I come from that area where Christopher comes from, and virtually everybody I grew up with had experienced police violence. I've been beaten up by the police. I've had my shirt ripped in half, in a really aggressive arrest. I've seen terrible police violence right in front of me. A friend of mine having These custody suites just bring back just such terrible memories. A friend having his head slammed on the counter because he wouldn't remove his shoelaces. And it was just acceptable. They got away with it. We always put up with it. And just at this time that you're highlighting in the film, I know it well because it was an heartbreaking time for me. Of course, we were involved in the anti-war process. My sister was dying of cancer after going through lots of violence in her marriage from a violent partner. And the day my sister died, I got a call from my best friend from a long time up there in the north, that his older brother, my friend as well, his older brother, my friend's called Liam Toolan, his older brother called Mark Toolan. I mean, coming from an Irish working class background, we'd all been in trouble with the police. We'd all suffered violence at the hands of the police. And the police had been round to Mark, and this is August 2005, just while all this is going on. My sister's in the last stages of cancer. And they go around to where Mark's living in a trailer with a warrant for an arrest for someone else who was staying with Mark. And they arrested him, wrongful arrest. He resisted as ever. He'd fought with the police and he resisted. And he was hit on the head with a rigid baton, taken into the police station, and then collapsed in the police station, and then was taken to the hospital for observation. They realised it was a wrongful arrest, mistaken identity. The hospital kept him for observation and then released him. And 3 days later, he collapsed and died with a massive brain hemorrhage, at the age of 35. And I said to Liam, what will you do? We'll do nothing. We're not going to do anything. They hate us already. They harassed the family already. So it's the tip of the iceberg. There's the 2,000 that have been killed that we know about here in the statistic. But the amount of violence that the police have got away with throughout our lifetimes, there have been violence on the street for working class people, for migrant people, especially for black people. And the Islamophobia that has come through now with the warmongering, it's all linked with the violent imperialist nature of our state, and that violence runs through all our interpersonal relations, and it's there all the time with the presence of the police. That's all I can say. It was an amazing piece and very shocking.
Anyone else? Yeah, please.
Yeah. I think that Crest of the Dick. So, Crest of the Dick made the statement that there were just a few bad uns in relation to the Sarah Everard case in terms of the Metropolitan Police. And it was, I think Crest of the Dick was the commanding officer for the police operation of the execution of John Charles Menezes. And I think it was Crest of the Dick. Crest of the Dick, just before that, was the head of Thames Valley Police. So she was the head of the police that covers Oxford. And so the way the state actually rewards and promotes those that are at the spearhead of injustice. If you look at Crest of the Dick, travel from being head of the police force that covers Oxford, head of Thames Valley Police, she's controlling the command room that leads to the execution of John Charles Menezes. And then, we saw Ian Blair talking, and then Ian Blair disappears off the scene, and Crest of the Dick, not long after, becomes the head of the Metropolitan Police. Yeah. And so in fact, so she's actually promoted, she's rewarded for the execution of John Charles Menezes. And then obviously then we see, what's been the result of Cressida Dick's command of the Metropolitan Police. So, yeah.
Right. So I think what I've realized in my time as an activist, and I think what this piece does really well, is to highlight how the state does have a monopoly on violence. It's an old phrase, but it rings true. I protested in Helsinki and I was tear gassed by the police officers, and I protested here in Oxford and I was hassled and dragged to the ground by a police officer. And in those moments, I knew that I was not being assaulted by an individual. I was not being assaulted by a person. I was being assaulted by a state. I was being assaulted by protective force. I was being assaulted by an organized criminal unit, you could say. It's an organized gang. But this piece, what I think highlights really well, is that in the official state narrative, if you're innocent, it's because you're a police officer. It was your job. If you're guilty, it's because you're an individual. And that's how they treat the police officers when they commit these injustices. That's what I had to say.
Thanks. Can you say something? Anyone else? Yeah.
Okay. I think the film as well makes the connection with the recent, with the question that was asked by Tyre Nichols' family, the parents of Tyre Nichols in America, and the question that the family asked in relation to the injustice meted out upon their family of the killing of their son. And the question is, why couldn't they see his humanity? Why couldn't they see his humanity? And that's a question that the film is constantly, in terms of the testimony of the families, is that implicit question that's coming out of the film, in terms of, but then that prompts another question, in terms of what is the role of the police and the state. So if you ask the question, why couldn't they see his humanity in terms of these ongoing deaths, in terms of the ultraviolence, then that prompts you to ask another question. What's actually the role of the police in relation to the state and to people and individuals and families?
Thanks. Apart from Kieran, anyone else? Yeah, please. One sec, Kieran. Thank you. Yeah, go on. Thanks.
Yeah, I think another thing that it really the film really brought home is the way that I guess this century they've kind of killed resistance. All anyone talks about is peaceful protest, and how it's they've turned us all into victims, and now that victimhood is a badge of honor, and you're only allowed to resist if your resistance does absolutely no damage to the people who are hurting you. It made me think of them two boys killed in Cardiff just recently, in the police chase, and the riot that happened afterwards was utterly condemned, and the police were allowed to just straight up lie about what happened to them boys. They said that they weren't being chased, and then literally a day later it was showed that they were, and when when people actually demonstrated real resistance to that, it was just completely condemned, I guess. I don't know, it's depressing. Yeah, no, not purse.
Well said, thank you.
In fact, I'm just to build on that point, then what subsequently happens then a few years later, Mark Duggan is shot. And then there's a massive outburst of frustration right across the nation, and the anger comes out. And the youth in all the major cities are on the streets. And I'm arguing with my left-wing pals who's saying these are just criminals, this is not. This has got no direction. This is what you're on about. This is the revolutionary youth who've had enough, who are now willing to take on the system. And then the function of the police then comes out in big style then, doesn't it then, in the aftermath? I mean, the city centres were burnt out, let's not forget it. We had a major uprising, 13 years ago, 12, 13 years ago. God, it made us excited for a few days. Didn't it? I was waiting for it here. And then the police, in the aftermath, a relentless campaign against thousands and thousands of people who in fact ended up as political prisoners and suffered the brutality and violence of the state for rising up against that constant repression that keeps the status quo the way it is. Mark Duggan had to die for it, and then thousands had to be sacrificed for it, and billions of police hours were spent on it.
Thanks for the screening. I might have the time frame wrong, but I felt as if most of the film was made during a period when people weren't using the web to share videos and images in the way that they are now. And I wondered what this film would look like now, and how does the possibility of sharing videos, sharing images, and sharing information more quickly affect the kind of films that you would make?
Thanks. Do you want to say anything? Thanks.
Yeah, there's a few things there. 30 years ago, on the 28th of July, Joy Gardner was killed in Hornsey in North London. So it's 30 years this year, and her mum, Myrna, is still kind of fighting for justice. The police officers that went into her house and put her in shackles and put 13 feet of tape around her mouth so she suffocated in front of her 5-year-old son were then promoted to be trainers in restraint. So it's not just the high-level cases, it's every single police officer that commits violence is then promoted. That tells you everything about the system, how it is. I think for us, when we made the film, it was shot in 2003, I think, or 2006. And the film is like a reflection of that time, but bringing it up to the present day. When George Floyd was murdered in America, there was this big outpouring of fake guilt and fake grief, and you saw what's happened since then. You've seen the television, you've seen the representation, you've seen what they've tried to do in terms of buying people out and trying to push representation as a solution. But we made this film, and the families in the film, and the families in other cases of the 2,000 that have happened so far, that's not enough for them. So the question really is what to do about this. We all know the pain and the trauma and the history about the resistance, but what can be done about it? Now, one of the problems is when we talk about the state, we talk about the police and the judiciary, and people now talking about abolition, which is fine. I'm all for police abolition, but if you don't abolish the courts and the government at the same time, it's a waste of time. It's just going to be reform of the police. So that's just a basic position. Now, what's happened since George Floyd was killed and this film came out is that there's been this outpouring of activism, which has been effective in some cases, but there's an awareness with young people especially around issues of gender and environment and violence. Okay, so young people are on the streets now protesting, like you did, and like other, you know, which they didn't do before. 10 years ago, it wasn't really happening. Yeah, so that's hopeful for me looking back at this. Yeah, the question is, once you go out on the streets and you have these mass movements, if you want to call them movements, what happens then? How do you consolidate that? How do you organize people? So we're taking this film round to build. When we made Injustice, which was in 2001, that was banned by Channel 4 and the BBC. It still is, 20 years later. If Channel 4 had shown Injustice in 2001, some of the people that have been killed so far since then wouldn't be dead, because the public reaction to the film would have changed something. It wouldn't have changed a lot, but it would have changed something. The pressure would have been on them. So as far as we're concerned, the blood of some of these people in the film is on the hands of Channel 4 and the hands of the media. And that's one of the big issues. And all the likes and all the clips that are shown on, that are done now, that are available with social media, won't do anything in terms of how you organize people and how that struggle is led. If the struggle is not led by the families in this film and the other families as well, it'll go nowhere. Because one of the issues with the state, whether it's the media or judiciary or the police, is that that's only one side of the story. The other side of the story is organizations that try to negotiate, try to improve the system, try to, you know, they talk about recruitment, they talk about training. There's never going to be any training or recruitment that can deal with this problem. The only thing that can be done is to completely and utterly demolish it and start again from scratch. There's a lot of campaigners, there are a lot of groups who have done very well out of this pain. Yeah. For 30 years, they've had their organizations, and all they've done is sit down and negotiate with the police, try to improve the inquest system. It's a waste of time. We don't need an inquest system. We need murder and manslaughter trials, and that's it. So the inquest system is a waste of time. But all the solicitors and all the campaign groups are putting their efforts in terms of trying to negotiate with the state for improvements. We're not interested in that, because all of these cases, like Myrna Simpson, Joy Gardner's mother, she still won those police officers in jail even after 30 years. And there's no reason why that can't happen. And the reason I say that is if you look at the states, they are now going back 30, 40, 50 years to look at miscarriages of justice. And some cases are coming through where the officers of the state that committed those crimes are actually going to jail, even after 30, 40, 50 years. So don't think just because of these cases from the 90s and the 80s are finished. They're not finished at all. The only way we can deal with this now is not with individual cases. The film puts lots of cases together and it talks about anti-imperialism and resistance, as it should. The thing now is how to get those families together to take on the state with the support of the people. And the way that they're going to do it is by organising a People's Tribunal on police killings. And what's going to happen with that is that 20 cases out of the 2,000, there's just 1% are being investigated by the families, by their own experts, and all those 20 cases are murder, manslaughter. Now these are cases which have been completely forgotten about, dismissed by the state, no court cases. So if you can take those 20 and prove what happened, and then move forward with a class action at an international level, that's something which hasn't been done before, because we've tried everything. Everything's been tried. And all the barristers and solicitors that work on these issues, they're not prosecutors, they don't attack. They defend, because they defend people who've been beaten by the police or people who've been miscarriages of justice. That's their history of defense. Those people are not the right people to prosecute, yeah? Because to take on the state, you have to attack, you don't plead with it. So the idea of the tribunal, which will be in May next year, is we're having people who are coming in from Palestine, from Gambia, from the States, from other places, who are going to listen to the families, and then that information is going to be put together to take class actions for not just the 20, but for as many of the 2,000 cases that the families want to. So this is something which hasn't been done before. We don't know how effective it's going to be, but it's the only thing that hasn't been tried. It takes the power away from the state. It takes the power away from the organizations that have been implicit in what's been going on. and it's something which young people can get involved with. All the time people come up to us and they say, what can we do, what can we do? This is something that we can do, it's not been tried before. So if anyone wants to support, we're on Migrant Media on Instagram, just keep in touch and we're going to put information out there. And there's stuff, there's things that people can do.
Okay, thanks again, Ken. Really great conversation. Thanks for presenting that. Thank you. Yeah, go on, Logan.